A lot of people hear the word stewardship and think it's a church word, something that gets said before the offering plate comes around. But what if it's the actual most practical framework for your entire life, your money, your time, your business, and your family? Welcome to the Good Steward. I help families steward their money, their time, and their life. This is an honest conversation around all of it, the wins, the lessons, and everything in between. My first guest is someone who has been one of the most quietly influential people in my life for the last 8 years. He has raised a family, navigated a career that led him to build a successful business. He sold it and is now full time in ministry, serving as a pastor in my church and leads my Bible study that I'm in every week. So he's the person I went to when I had questions I didn't know how to ask about money, about drive, and about what the Bible actually says versus what we've been told about it. So his name is John, and today we're starting with the basics, what stewardship actually means and why most of us have been thinking about it wrong. So let's get into it.
Really honoured to have a chat and
Yeah,
talk about this really important subject, I think,
yeah.
stewardship, particularly as a Christian. I suspect that has a lot more relevance and meaning for us as Christians. But yeah, it's
You're
it's
right.
it's really an interesting topic because I think the world sort of tells us that this is my thing or
Mm,
that belongs to me
mhm.
or
Ownership.
that I own it,
Mhm.
And I think our whole thing, in our society is you go and you study hard and then you go to work and you work hard and you earn money and you think, well, that's mine, that's I've earned it.
Mm.
And
I feel like you feel the weight of that though too,
yeah, I think
of
so.
acquiring it, maintaining it, making it.
Yeah,
And if you fail, you kind of probably feel the heaviness of losing it a lot more.
yeah. And I think there is a certain amount of truth to that, that
Mm.
we worked hard and we've earned and that, and, being able to make our way in life. But from a Christian point of view, fundamentally, I think it's different. It starts with this idea that God actually is in control of everything, and He made everything, and He sustains everything, and so He provides everything. Everything is His. Um, there's a verse in Psalm 24, verse 1, and it says something along the lines: the earth is the Lord's, and
Mhm.
everything in it.
Yeah.
The people and everything that He made, in a sense, belongs to Him. So this idea of that, like where you say, "Oh, this is my thing. This belongs to me," is sort of not really the biblical concept. The biblical concept is, firstly, God owns everything. He made everything. He sustains everything,
Mhm.
and that we are given good things that God has bestowed on us, and we are to be good managers, good stewards.
Yeah.
So the idea of a steward is that we oversee
Mm.
something, whatever that might be. It might be possessions. It might be, in the ancient days, it was, an estate or a household,
Mhm.
and a steward was someone who looked after that, oversaw everything on behalf of the master, on behalf of the owner. And they were to really do, a good job
Mhm.
of doing that. So I think that's the sort of idea of biblical stewardship, is that, we get possessions, we have maybe a business, a house,
Mhm.
whatever it might be that we have. We are to be good stewards of that, that God has given us, and we're called to be faithful.
Yeah.
So, I don't think we're called to necessarily be overly focused on what are the results of our life and how successful we were and all the
Mm.
rest. It's the essence of Christian response is, were you faithful?
Yeah.
And and the Apostle Paul, I think he talks about this. I just have a verse here that he says in 1 Corinthians chapter 4. He says, "Look at me as a servant of Christ, who has been put in charge of explaining God's mysteries. That is, the good news about Jesus Christ."
Mm.
And then he says, "Now a person who is put in charge as a manager must be faithful."
Mm.
So it doesn't really matter, he says, so much of what people think of me. He says, "Oh, it doesn't really matter what you think of me." He says, "Ultimately, it's what God thinks of me."
Yeah. You're
And
right.
because he's the boss, in a sense. He's the one that I have to report to.
Mhm.
Because he was getting criticised about his ministry and about the way he did things. And so he's basically defending himself. Look, actually, I'm just a steward. I'm just a servant of Jesus. He's given me this great privilege of being a manager of the mysteries, he calls the gospel of Jesus
Mm.
Christ. And I've just got to be faithful to that. and I leave the results up to him.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thinking. Firstly is God has everything. Everything belongs to God. He made it. He sustains it. And he, by his grace, he gives us these things to enjoy. It's not as though he's sort of wanting us to not enjoy the things he gives us.
Yeah.
But he says, I just want you to be faithful in managing them for me, on my behalf. So,
because we often think of materials. You've mentioned this before, and it's something that a perspective I didn't think of, because I always say skills, but you're saying gifts. So
yeah,
we often think in material terms rather than actually there's this other component as well that makes up stewardship.
yeah. I think so often we go to money and wealth as being
Yep.
the sort of go-to, and I think it's a much more broader thing than that. So
Yep.
if you think about the very basic thing of time,
Mhm.
how do we manage our time as Christians? Opportunities.
Mhm.
How do we manage the opportunities that God gives us? So they're sort of basic things that all of us are given. We're
Yeah.
given a certain amount of time. We don't know how long. How faithful are we to the way that God wants us to live, to use that time? What about the opportunities he gives us? Of course, those opportunities feed into other things as well, like what are we going to do with our lives? What work choices are we going to make?
Where do we live?
Where do we live? All of those things are part of that. And I think the other thing too is he gives us abilities. He gives us natural gifts, natural abilities. Some people are very blessed, with natural
Being very
abilities.
smart.
I'm not sure I've been blessed with too many of those, but
Oh, I think you have.
so some people are given a lot of. Now, what do you do with that?
Do you funnel it into a way that furthers the kingdom of God rather than?
Yeah, and it's because the natural thing is, how do I? If you're an athlete or something like that, you have that ability. How do you, how do you do the best you can?
Difference between what is, I guess, your desire and knowing what to do with it? Like, if you have a gift or a skill, how do you know your desires versus what God wants?
Yeah,
It's probably a very common
yeah. I think it's
tension we feel.
It's one of those things about really knowing what God says, really understanding the Bible in a way that helps us to understand the principles for our lives. I don't think there's any easy answers to some of these things. So, if you take the example,
not clear cut.
Sorry,
it's not clear cut.
I don't think. I think some things aren't clear cut. God just leaves it to us to make decisions. We're not robots. Sometimes we'll get it right, and sometimes we won't. But God's grace is amazing. When we fail, he doesn't give up on us. He continues with us. And if you come back to that example of if you're an athlete, and you're a Christian.
Yeah.
Well, I think as an athlete, you've been given a natural ability that's God given. And the desire to do the best you can with that, I think, is a good desire. And along the way, God opens up opportunities for you to impact
others,
a whole world, a whole network of people that the rest of us are probably not going to meet. So how do you measure that? I think as a Christian, we're going to be called in all different walks of life to use our natural abilities, but also to remember that ultimately we're meant to be called to be faithful to God.
Yep.
How do we do that? It's in our conversations, in our time, in our opportunities, in the way we live, in the way we spend our time, our money, our possessions. Is there a difference between an athlete who's just out there to earn, squillions of dollars versus maybe a Christian who's got a different perspective?
Yeah.
Different values, biblical values, about generosity, about how do I live my life in such a way that people will know that, God is my first priority. It's not about I don't enjoy the things, but, how does my life convey that? So, when it comes to stewardship, I think there's so many, it's a whole of life thing. When we are tempted to sort of go, it's about money. And then as Christians we go, well, as long as I tithe,
yes,
I give my 10%,
I saw something about this, it was someone else's perspective, and I've never thought about it this way, that some people just go and tithe and think that's the act of stewardship, is that 10%.
Yeah.
It's not.
I think it's a tempting thing to go, well, I've ticked that box. Everything else is mine. The other 90% is mine. I've given God 10%.
Yeah.
But I think biblically, we have to start with 100% is God's. And the 10% is just a token. In fact, the New Testament doesn't talk really about 10% per se. New Testament concept is if the Lord's blessed you, according to the way he's blessed you, so you give. So I've often said to people, in my life, when we were young, married, kids, mortgage,
Yeah, the stresses that we all
10%
feel.
was like, it was hard. But now in my state of life, 10% wouldn't be God honouring in my thinking, my view anyway.
Yeah.
So New Testament leaves it as how has the Lord
Is it your
prospered
heart?
you? It's a heart response.
Yeah.
But it's also in accordance with the way he's blessed you financially as well. And so the first thing is actually 100% is God's. The 10% is just a token. It's actually a way, I think, of expressing worship.
I really
So,
like that. Because it's in the forefront of your mind every step that you take every day.
Yeah.
If you're thinking about, what job you should take, not necessarily just the money side, what relationships, where do we live, what school do my kids go to, all of those decisions.
Yeah, I think so. I think this is a way of expressing, one, our dependence on God, that he's the ultimate giver. It's an expression of our gratitude to God. It's an expression of our praise for him, for what he's done. And so I really do think that being a good steward is about worship as well. It's about, Paul says in 1 Corinthians 10, I think it is, he says, whatever you do, whatever you drink and eat and whatever decisions you make, do it all for the glory of God. And I think that's a really good question to ask. I mean, I look at my life, I think I've failed so many times to take that into consideration. I just think a lot of our lives we live, in not thinking about, is this for the glory of God, but is this actually for my good? Is this actually good for me?
Yeah.
And what we fail to realise is that if we do it for his glory, it will be good for us too. So this idea of tithing, I think, is I've met people when we were doing financial counselling or debt counselling, even Christians who are really in trouble financially. Yeah. And when we drill down into their finances, we found in some cases they were actually maxing out their credit card or credit cards and multiple credit cards. And the one constant they couldn't give up was, I've got to pay my tithes to the church. Because if I fail to pay my tithes, then
I feel
something...
like it was consequential, like there was a consequence if they didn't.
Like
they were, God was going to...
Yeah, God was
lightning bolt,
me,
if I don't do this.
And I remember saying to people, how much does God want? And they would look at me and say, well...
You think God wants you in a ball and chains? Being in debt?
That's the thing.
Like bad debt. Like credit card debt.
I remember saying, well, actually God wants all of us. He doesn't want a part of us. He wants a full relationship. He doesn't want to just be part of our lives. He wants to be in every aspect of our lives. And he doesn't ask us for 10% per se. He just says, give me your heart. Love me. Live your life in relationship with me. And I'll show you things and take you places that you've never imagined possible. And is it God honouring to max out your credit card so that you can pay your 10% to the church? Because the Bible also says don't owe anyone anything. In other words, don't be overdue in what you owe. Doesn't mean you can't have a mortgage on your house or whatever. Just means...
That'd be a good verse to break down at some point. I'm not too sure if that's for now, but it is one thing that does get brought up a lot.
Yeah, owe no man anything. It's just one of those... I don't think it means don't have a loan.
Yeah.
It might do, but I don't think it necessarily means that. It just means pay people when things are due. And financially, that means understanding your situation and what you're capable of being able to take on in terms of debt and all of those sorts of things. But I remember saying, is God honouring to max out your credit card so you can pay your tithes? Or is there another way? Because if we have this idea 100% is God's, then maybe there's other ways that we can become involved in God's kingdom that for a time mean that we can't even do the 10%.
Yeah.
We might do 1%, but maybe you could become involved in the church, in an outreach, in ministry,
your time, like your gifts.
Time and gifts.
It's giving in other ways other than monetary.
Yeah.
Is that what you mean?
That's what I mean, yeah. That sort of thing. It's, I think just sometimes
I think people think tithing is just the money. This is just my belief.
Yeah.
Tithing is just the money component, but it's also the time you invest in others and in the church.
Exactly. And I think a lot of people sort of go, that's secondary. The tithe has to be the first thing. And I think, well, the New Testament principle is just prayerfully think, given my situation, what can I do in finances?
Yeah.
What can I do with my time? What gifts do I have? What can God use of me that maybe is being underutilized now? And go and have a talk with your pastor and think through the ways in which you can become involved.
Yeah.
In order for you to become good and faithful in your finances.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's a process of time.
You've got to get out of debt.
You've got to get out of debt.
Behavior, like new behavior
new
or
thinking,
habit.
New mindset, new skill set.
Topic, I think, mindset around money.
Yeah, it's look, most of us are not very good at money management.
Why do you think that is? Education, perhaps?
I think it even goes back further. It goes back to what was your family situation?
Yeah.
How important was money in your family? How did your mum and dad use finances?
Yep.
Was it a point of tension?
I laugh because I've got my own money story. So
and we all have our money stories, and a lot of our money stories
had to break a lot of things, like break a lot of patterns that you just grew up constantly hearing.
I think that's the problem, is that we tend to repeat the bad things that we pick up along the way, the baggage. And changing that mindset is a really critical part of it. It's the first thing, really, is to think, how can I, develop a different idea about what money is?
What does the Bible say about it?
And, what does the Bible say about it? What are some of the principles that we can employ to change my situation? Because you so easily pick up the patterns that you were brought up with and the values that you were brought up with.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, I don't think our education system prepares us for being good money managers.
I didn't have any at school. Like, I graduated, probably 20, I'm showing my age now, but let's say 20 years. And I don't think, just even broadly speaking, yes, money management, but just even how to live beyond school. What prepares you? Resume building, how to find a job, how to navigate the workplace.
So basic, though, isn't it? Why don't we teach our children from a very early age, and then progressively, so that when they leave school in grade 12, they are skilled, they have the skills, the basic skills for money management.
Yeah.
It's so critical, it's so fundamental, and yet we just don't do it.
And you often, the only way you learn is through bad choices. Series of bad choices.
It's a tough way to learn.
You don't have a wise person in your life.
It's very tough to learn those lessons. Some people are better at it naturally than others.
Sure.
When we do pre-marriage counselling, we say to a couple, you always do your money management together, but one of you will probably be better at it.
Yep.
And they're the one to basically take the main responsibility. But don't
rely.
Yeah, don't rely. You need to
person.
both be involved in those decisions, but one becomes a better manager of the day-to-day. And I remember we went and did some sessions with some high school students, just teaching them how to put a basic budget together and how to manage that budget. It was really enlightening, because most of them have never thought about it. And yet here they were leaving school, either going to uni or going to the workplace, and it was very evident they were very unprepared for what they were about to face. And it made them actually think about, what do I need? Well, I need to have wheels, I need to have a house, I need to have food. And then we went clothes, and we went through all these things and said, well, what do you think you would spend on renting, somewhere? And it was really mind-blowing for a lot of them. They'd never really thought about it before.
Yeah.
And then to take them through that process of saying, what do you think you're going to earn? And just imagine what you're going to earn, and let's do a budget based on that. Okay, it doesn't balance. Well, how would we work through that to balance that budget? And, it's not rocket science. It just involves some hard thinking and some hard decisions so that you balance it. And then the next thing is, well, how do I use it? Because it's just numbers on a page.
Yep. How do you actually practically
what do you do Monday? When Monday comes, So we would teach them how to do, Monday through Sunday. What is it that you do to make these numbers on a page actually work for you?
Yeah.
And that, we did that. My wife and I, Narelle, did that for many years.
Is that program still around now?
It's still around, but in a different format. So,
yeah, right. Okay.
was part of an organisation called CAP, Christians Against Poverty.
Mhm.
It's now called Hope Economy.
Okay.
And when we were doing it, we'd go into people's homes at their invitation.
Mm-hmm.
They would share with us some of the deepest, darkest secrets, some of the things that they were desperately ashamed of.
Yeah.
And we would come with a message of hope.
Mm.
Hope, from a Christian point of view, not just hope of getting your finances in order, but hope for what Jesus came to do, which was to give life, abundant life, how to live the fulfilled life. So that was a real pleasure and a privilege to be in people's homes who are at the point of desperation and to say, we can bring hope into this situation.
Yeah.
It's going to involve you to make hard decisions.
Choices.
It's going to involve discipline. It's going to involve a different mindset. It's going to involve a process. But if you follow it, it will work.
Yeah.
It's simple. It will work. It's still going on today, a different format. It's more of a mentor model.
Yeah.
Whereas we were a debt counselling service. But the same principles apply as it did then. And we saw, not everybody, I'd say less than half the people we saw actually went through and found sort of financial freedom.
Why do you think the other 50?
There's all sorts of reasons. I mean,
Overwhelmed.
Just bad habits.
Do you think it's that mindset that you were talking about earlier, perhaps however they grew up, or maybe some experiences they've experienced? It's a battle with the mind.
It is. It's hard to change the habits that you've grown up with, the things that you saw, particularly in your parents' example, to shake that, to develop a new values, new mindset.
Or just even seeing it. I think half the battle is even being aware that you might have to.
Being aware, and I think also, I mean, addictions is another big problem. So that if you have an addiction, and if we found that someone had an addiction, and that's usually something that people don't want to share.
Yeah.
But if we found that someone had an addiction, we would ask them to address that first.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't matter how much you spend time putting together budgets and all of these sorts of things. If you have an addiction, it is stronger. That pull is stronger than working to a budget.
Yeah.
So you have to address that issue before you can. I mean, the other thing too is that.
Was there alignment issues? Because things that I see is alignment, like in values.
Oh, definitely values, and also alignment between like husband and wife or partners.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah, that is a really big issue. And again, what we would say to people is if we cannot do this with you together, we're going to step back. Yep. So we're quite upfront and saying this is what you have to do for us to be involved. Yeah. And if you're willing to do that, we know that this will work for you. But
so what happens if there's one partner that wants to, like that they're in that situation where they can't get their partner along for the journey? Like how does one navigate that? Because I'm sure there's a bunch of people listening that fall into that category where perhaps they were the ones driving the budget out of maybe necessity, or maybe it's their skill, but having a partner that has no desire to be involved and is perhaps causing more pressure.
Yeah, good question. I think communication is the key. If you talk things through and get to the bottom of why is it that partner doesn't want to become part of this.
Yeah.
There are all sorts of reasons, but I think communication's key. Find out, try and work through what are the issues that are stopping you from participating in this process.
Yeah.
And sometimes it could be just fear. It could be addictions.
Yeah.
It could be just bad habits. It could be that I just don't want to be accountable.
Yeah.
There's all sorts of reasons, but unless you can get to the bottom of that and then develop, so sometimes it's like a fear that I'm not going to have any money to spend of my discretion and those sort of things. We have in our system, we would come up with, if the budget allowed for it, to have discretionary spending. Because again, you'll find that couples, one might be a spender, one might be a saver.
There's always one or the other. I'm definitely the saver.
I mean,
my husband's definitely the spender.
Yeah. And how do you reconcile those without it being a point? This is what happens: is it becomes a point of tension. Then it's like, the person who's a saver says, you're spending all this money,
Mhm.
it becomes this real tension. And
Yep.
before long, tension becomes relationship dysfunction.
Mhm.
And we found that finances were a major cause of relationship breakdown. So
I
the
agree.
way to overcome that is to agree to working together,
Mhm.
but allowing in the budget discretionary amounts that you can spend.
Yep.
So there are things
Individually,
individually.
because you've got both different values on what you
Yeah.
like to spend money on. That's
Exactly.
one lesson we learned early on in marriage, is we had one bucket of discretionary. And I kind of giggle about it now, but I was building up some resentment. I get frustrated because don't spend lots of money, but when I do, it's usually like a couple $100. But it was always empty because Josh has a different spending style.
Yeah.
He would he'd have the pay cycle and then
Yeah.
drain it within the next pay cycle. So we ended up splitting it. And it actually, like, Josh is really good. And he doesn't kind of spill over to the other buckets or areas in our budget. But he has learned also over the years that keeping an eye on his long-term goals. So,
Yeah.
but it's also taught me, though, to enjoy the little moments, because I'm not one that would spend on little things. So it's kind of helped both of us. Yeah.
We're all different.
But there is a moment where it was like, mate.
And it threatens, if not resolved, it becomes a big issue. So
Yeah.
so you have a discretionary amounts that you have in the budget. The spender's going to have it spent before the month is up.
Yep.
And the saver's going to be holding it and holding it and holding it, and then maybe spending it, but spending it on something that they've saved up for.
Yeah.
They need
I'm
or
that
whatever.
person.
Yeah. So, and you don't have the arguments so much because it's like, it's your money to spend with what you want.
Yeah.
Once we've catered for all of the things in the household, we've said together, this is what we're going to do in terms of budget, and we have a system for handling that so we don't overspend and all those sort of things. There's your money you can spend.
Mhm.
You can go away and do that. Maybe you want more, but your budget won't allow it. So, okay, you can go out and work more, or you can save more, or whatever. And there are some things that you'll save for that you'll just know that you want to save up together, that you agree together, like a holiday or a new car or some big thing that you'll save for.
Yeah.
So that's really important
too. Do you
too.
see stewardship? Because we often think in singular, like my goals or my gifts, but as a union, as a marriage, like God, because we are one.
Sometimes when we're talking to couples, like pre-marriage or marriage counselling, is to picture ourselves as two circles. If you imagine
a Venn diagram, like
a Venn. Well, and this is the thing we often say, there's two separate circles. Is that a good picture of marriage? Like, no, that's not a really good picture. And then I put the two circles and we make one circle.
Yeah.
And a lot of people say, yeah, that's it. And I say, I'm not so sure that's the best picture of marriage. And then we do the Venn diagram, because you retain your individuality. You are distinct persons, but you are joined together in this relationship, a lifelong relationship of love, where you are one, but you are individuals. And so you have to find a way where you, from a stewardship point of view, you are together, you're on board the vessel, but you might be doing different roles and different things.
Someone's an engineer and someone's piloting.
Someone's got to do the driving, someone's got to be in the engine room. And together you function, that the ship moves forward.
Yeah.
And I think from a stewardship point of view, as a married couple, you've got to see yourself as stewards together in that.
Yeah.
Not just individuals. So, if you're not married, you're an individual. You're called to be faithful. In a marriage couple, of course, being faithful stewards means being faithful to each other as well. So that's a really important part of being good stewards as a married couple, because when we are committed and faithful in a covenant relationship before God, that brings Him glory, it brings Him pleasure. It's doing life God's way. So it's again a very big part, I think, of being a good steward as a couple.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, we can migrate to when you get married and you're a couple, there's the family, and how do you navigate?
Yeah, that's
life, careers, family, yourself. It was a business.
Yeah, look, I think that's a real challenge. When we first got married, we were both working. We struggled to have kids, and then when the kids did come along, Narelle's mostly, spent time in the home until we had our business, and then she would work during school hours and so forth. But look, when we came up to the coast, it was really to take on a small family business that my dad and my brother and a couple of other guys had started.
Mm.
And it had grown. It was about 6 years after it started, 6 or 7 years, and my dad had wanted to retire or sell it. My brother wasn't willing and probably able to take on the management.
Yeah.
And so we prayed about it. And I mean, it was interesting because I think God had already placed in me a desire to take on the challenge of a business.
Yeah.
So we decided that if we prayed about it, if the house sold, we'd move. And we came up. So, you know, we were running the business, growing the business. We were running kids and youth ministries in our church. We had kids growing up. We had mortgages to pay. In those days, my brother and I had our houses on the line. So everything was involved in the business, you know. How to juggle that growing business and your ministries and the involvement in the church and family life. Yeah, not easy. And I think it comes back again to thinking through this first principles again. You know, everything belongs to the Lord. Everything is God's. He's given us these good things to enjoy, but also to be faithful. And sometimes it's not easy to know what that exactly looks like. I don't think it necessarily means that there's some sort of magic formula about how much time you spend in the business, how much time you spend at home, how much time you spend in church. I think even for someone who's in a career situation, you're called to probably put more time in at certain times in your career to be successful, to be the best in what you do. I don't think it means that you neglect everything else at all, but I think sometimes there's got to be an understanding that I just need to put in for this. Yeah. And there'll be other seasons in your life when you can take your foot off the accelerator a bit here to engage more in something maybe involving your kids or whatever it is.
Yeah, or ministry.
Your ministry. I mean, it's tough sometimes, but I also remember someone saying, you know, if you want a job done, just give it to a busy person. And I remember in those days being super, super busy, but somehow, in some way, sometimes being able to take on something extra more easily than when you're not. Yeah. So I was doing things like working quite a good number of hours, but then you're leaving work, trying to get away to see your son playing footy or cricket or whatever it was. He was whatever stage of life he was in because he wanted to play just about everything. So I look back and I think I probably regret not being there for more of those things. I always had this idea that, okay, I want to be home every night if possible. I want to be there to tuck my kids in, to pray with them, to read stories, to just be there, the presence. Yeah, but sometimes I'm missing dinner. Sometimes, I think I got home pretty much every night, or most nights, to tuck them in and do those things. But then there was, they have their school activities, they have their sports activities, and then you're thinking, it's funny how every time there's something like that, there's something urgent comes up in the workplace or whatever. And I'm not sure that I always got it right. Yeah. It actually came home to me recently. I had a scheduled eye specialist appointment, and my grandson was also having his breakup, and he was for his daycare kindy. Yeah. And he was doing some sort of little routine in a song and dance routine, and it was like they rang me and said, "You're still all right for this appointment?" And I said, "No, actually." I'm not going to make it. And they were really quite peeved, this specialist, he's very important. And I just said, look, I'm really sorry, but, my grandson's having his breakup at kindy. And I think they thought I was nuts. But it just sort of struck me, you know what? There's always going to be something that comes up that's really important and urgent. But my focus as a grandparent has been, I just want to be there. Yeah. Maybe it's to make up for the things that I wasn't there for my kids when I felt I should be, because I didn't balance work, ministry and family as well as I could have.
So what encouragement do you have for potentially someone that's listening that is struggling all three, business, family, ministry?
Yeah, look, I think the first thing is...
words of wisdom.
I think just remember God God is for you, not against you. He made you. He designed you. He put you there. You're there for a time and place and a purpose. I think keep your relationship with the Lord close as the number one thing. As a good steward, that's the most important thing. It's not so much what you do. I think then thinking through clearly where the boundaries might be. So it's not that you never break those, but having those boundaries on where you want to be with your family. For instance, I think it's a good thing to have the routines included in those routines are those things that like going to church and imparting that sense in which our first priority is our relationship with the Lord.
Yeah.
And part of what we do is to go and worship him in this way with others. So keeping those and kids like routines, having the boundaries, thinking through what can I commit to every night or every day? What can I do in relation to that? And then when something comes up that threatens those things, you may be called to put more time into work. There's an urgent thing. There's a crisis. Have an understanding with your wife or your husband that this is for a season.
Yeah.
The problem is
when that season goes a bit too long.
Season goes too long. I remember not even when I was working in my own business, but working for someone else, working huge hours.
Yeah. I
was in IT, often after-hours stuff, conversions of systems and implementation of systems.
It all happens after everyone's gone home.
And you work in these long hours and, maybe 2-3 months. And then I'd have to come to that realisation that I need to reassess, because what happens is you get so used to working 60 hours a week or 70 hours a week. And then when the pressure's off, you feel guilty. It's
I've heard of that.
5 o'clock, I can't go home at 5 o'clock. And I think my advice would be step back, think about how long have you been doing this? How long did you commit to doing this?
Yeah.
You need to reassess. You need to rethink.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always have, I'm not too sure where I got it from, somewhere, probably TikTok, Instagram, but it was quite good. It was like, if something affects your faith, relationships or health, because that's another one about stewardship that I've probably more recently thought, like, changed my perspective. Like, stewardship's way more than money. And someone brought up, how about your body and your health? And I was like, wow. So, but if anything kind of affects those three too much.
Yeah, that's right. I think you've just got to have those times when you step back and get perspective. The problem is that we get so caught up in what we're doing that we find it a struggle to step back and get perspective again, or have your group of friends or your pastor or someone, maybe your connect group, your small group, that can actually speak to you and sort of say, hey, how's it going? And sometimes awaken us to this situation that maybe others are seeing that we can't.
Do you think it's like, how they say it takes about 90 days for a new habit to form, potentially, because you've been in that window? It's also then starting to break a habit.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's the problem, is that developing new habits is hard. Once you've established them and it becomes the norm, it's so much easier. So that's always going to be the most difficult thing, I think. It's possible, I mean, you look back through the Bible and you see, people who are very, very busy and able to juggle things. I mean, the Apostle Paul was a great example of a very busy life, dealing with a lot of things. We're called on to do the best we can with what we have. Be faithful. And it's faithful in the small things as well, I think. And it's just broader than just money. It's when I was in business, for instance, I think stewardship also brings in this sense of, well, we had nearly 400 staff at one stage before we sold out. When I thought about that, I think, it's probably 1,000 people that are depending on our business. So there's a sense in which what is my responsibility to them as well. Just as it was a difficulty that I had if we hit hard times, actually putting people off. I struggled with those sorts of issues.
Yeah.
I remember we got to a particularly difficult time in the business. I think it was after GST had come in. We'd had this big rise and then drop off.
Big bust.
And
my dad went bankrupt then.
Okay.
Yeah, it was when GST
It was a
came in.
difficult time.
Farmers stopped spending. He was in the car dealership industry.
Because there'd been this big move up beforehand, and then June 30th, it was just like it dropped off a cliff, and I remember looking at it, I'm a bean counter, I'm an accountant, so I'm looking at the numbers and going, we need to make decisions, and we put it off until February of the following year. And we had 3 key guys that we had to put off.
Yeah.
And I remember calling them in and, I was just really sorry, to have to make those decisions. I remember one guy saying, "Oh, look," he said, "it's been a privilege to work here. We'd loved it." It's funny though, I just had a job offer from someone up the road.
Oh, so you didn't have to do the bad deed.
And it was, the other 2 were not dissimilar, but had
offers.
had other opportunities, and it sort of led. Okay, we had some others that we had to do as well, and then things gradually picked up and then took off. It was the opposite. So when we got in the early 2000s through to the end, towards the end of before the GFC, things just took off.
Yeah.
And the business just went into areas that I would never have imagined to go. So that was always my thing, is like, how do I exercise my responsibility to 1,000 people in our community?
Yeah.
As well. Hard to juggle sometimes, because what's happening with my kids and my wife, what's happening in the church and our ministries, what about those kids that we want to minister to every week?
Yeah.
It's, you just have to pray for God's wisdom and God's help and God's strength and His grace to pick up when you fail.
Yeah.
And we do.
It's one thing that you mentioned, when your business took off. I've had this conversation with you quite a bit in Bible study, and it was around, how do you know when you've got that drive to do something? Let's say for you, it would have been probably expansion because your business is growing. How do you know, like, obviously I don't have a big business, but I still had the desire to start a business and grow. My struggle was between contentment and growth. I probably had some mindset stuff where the verses around contentment kept me small, but I still had this drive to do more. And I've often spoken to you about this. And like, I guess when you're in a season of expansion, how do you navigate that season? I guess this is for business owners.
Sometimes the harder one is, you've got the drive, but it's not actually happening,
Yeah.
So then you can become quite discontented and frustrated because, so I'm a bit of a planner, particularly when it came to business. So I was pretty diligent in business plans. So I would do very detailed business plans in conjunction with my managers and others, but particularly my key guys.
Yeah.
And then I would submit that often to banks, want to know what you're doing. So I'd submit that to the banks, and I would then put a verse on the bottom. I probably told you about this. A verse on the bottom, Proverbs 16:9. Man makes his plans, but God determines his steps. And I think that was just an expression of, I want to be faithful to God in being a good steward, and I don't want to presume it's my plan, or it's I wanted to convey that actually, what God wants and God wills is more important. And this is something that bank managers found very difficult to understand. Sometimes they would ask me, and sometimes they would just totally ignore it. Sometimes they'd say, what's that there for? And I'd say, well, this is my best effort, in conjunction with our people. As a Christian, I'm aware that God might have other plans. I don't want to presume that I've got it right. We have, again, it comes back to stewardship. He's given us abilities. In my case, I had the ability to work through the numbers. I had the ability to think in conjunction with others strategically. I'm not an original thinker, so I'm not a great creative type person.
Yeah, but you can take an idea.
But I can take an idea and I could run with that. And so that's where I picked up ideas and bits of ideas, and then we'd formulate a plan. I'd say, that is the best of our ability to do that. We've been diligent in that. But I got to recognise that God is in control. For me as a Christian, God's in control. And his plans may differ. And his plans will actually override whatever plans we have. And they'd be like, oh, yeah.
So, I've actually taken that idea and stuck it. So in the vision-based budgeting methods course that I've done, we create like a family vision. So that's getting people in alignment. But in the bottom of it, I've done the same thing because a lot of people struggle where it says, you shouldn't plan. Like, that verse that you said, they kind of take it the other way where it's like, you shouldn't plan. And I'm like, well, no. You should have a vision for your family, work together what that is. But I think it's super important that it's not your ownership concept. This is God's. And then having that little, so I've taken that little idea. So
I don't think the Bible prohibits planning. In fact, I think there's lots of little nuggets in the Bible that talk about examples of even in the natural world of, the ants and so forth. All of these, they plan and they do things.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a prohibition on planning. I just think it's a prohibition on pride.
On this is my plan,
and
it goes
happen.
my way.
Yeah.
And I think that's where
the
key distinction is, that ownership.
I do. I think so. And I think it's, again, stewardship means he's given you the ability to do these things.
Yeah.
He hasn't given us the blueprint for your business.
No.
He's given us the principles. He's given you gifts.
Yeah.
He's given you the abilities to do these things. So do the best with those abilities that you have, but ultimately submit to the sovereignty of God in it and say, God, you're in control.
Yeah.
You know what I found mostly, and I should say this too, like even when it comes to church, I've been big on plan. Our church has a vision statement with numbers, with specifics in there. And I know that goes against the grain for a lot of Christians and a lot of Christian leaders. But I actually think when you have that vision there that you think is what God is calling you to do, you get focused on it. People get focused on it. One of our things in our vision is to plant another church.
Yeah.
We're talking about it a lot more in the last 2 years than we did before that. And it's because we actually think that that's what God's calling us to do at some point. We put a time frame on it, but when we talk amongst ourselves, we just go, you know what, whatever God does, he will. We think that's what he wants us to do. What I found in life, particularly in business, is that often the end goal of the plan came to fruition. But the process to get there and the timing to get there was totally different from what we'd imagined.
Yep.
It might have taken longer. I mean, sometimes I've noticed that things would go, like, it's just not happening. You've got to the end of your time frame. It still hasn't happened. And then the following year, bang, it all happened.
Yeah.
It all happened.
But if it happened back then, it wouldn't have worked versus if it happened a year later.
Yeah, exactly. I think sometimes just seeing, it's great to be able to look back and go, oh yeah,
hindsight.
I think God was guiding us through, and he was delaying that for a reason.
Yeah.
And not always, you can't always see it, and you just have to trust that God knows best.
Do you think it's when, the other thing is yes, have a plan, and if things aren't working out how you expect, being okay and content with it's over to God. Do you know what I mean? There's this,
absolutely.
But I guess that's hung up with your ownership. If something doesn't work, you kind of get frustrated, whereas you kind of have contentment going, well, obviously there's a bigger reason.
Yeah, look, I mean, you touch on a subject there which is really important for Christians, and that is, to be content, to find contentment.
Yeah.
Some of us have personalities and natures that find that easier.
Yeah.
And some of us really struggle. But, the Apostle Paul says in Philippians that, I've been through the good times, I've been through the bad times, I've been through the struggles, I've been through easy street. And one thing I've learned is I've learned to be content. He didn't say it came naturally, and I suspect it didn't come naturally to him. He was a man in a hurry. But he learned to be content even when he didn't have anything. And I think that's ultimately a wonderful example of just being dependent on God. I'm handing this over to you. Show me what I need to do now.
Yeah.
Give me peace about what we're doing. And I think that's why God has so often had to teach me patience, and I think the delays in reaching plans, one of the big lessons was just, you know what, I'm in control. You're not in control. You just have to learn to trust me.
Character building.
Trust me. Yeah, very much so. Trust is the big issue, isn't it?
Yeah.
Can we trust God with this?
And can we be content if it's not?
And can we be content
how we envision it?
In the desert times, in the difficult times? I mean, I suppose a lot of people who are in business have the same issues, but there were issues that kept me awake at night.
Yeah.
Often. Actually, I shouldn't say kept me awake. I would often fall asleep
and wake up at 3 a.m.
And wake up at 3 a.m.
Yep.
I would find that I was just overwhelmed. The troubles that I imagined were overwhelming. The troubles were huge. Everything's bigger at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. I would wrestle with God in prayer.
Yeah.
I would ask for peace. I would seek peace. I would desperately want peace. I would just toss and turn.
Yeah.
I came to realize, for me, part of the answer was I'd get out of bed. I'd go to my office. I would get a pen and paper and I would write, what is it I'm struggling with? Actually just write down the issue.
Like the worries.
The worry. What is the worry? What can I do about it?
You're like, nothing.
And it's prayerfully like, maybe there's one thing, maybe there's 6 things.
Yeah.
And then having worked through that prayerfully, I would go back to bed and I would hand it over to God. And I imagined this thing that I've just been wrestling with as like this huge big rock, this stone. And I'm just like handing it, rolling it over on God, remembering what Peter says in 1 Peter 5, I think, cast all your care on him.
Yeah.
Why? Because he cares for you. And that sense of knowing that he cares for me just gave me the peace. And I would then fall asleep. I'd wake up the next day. I would say most of those things never happened or never happened to the extent that I imagined.
Thought of it would.
And in the case where it did happen, I had things that I'd prayerfully thought about, practical issues that I wrote down. So for me, that was a way to work through the difficulties at times when, you can imagine a situation where you think the whole business is at stake. It could be, I don't know. I mean, it could be we had some big customers, some big builders, and they fall over. How am I going to, how am I going to struggle with cash flow?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not just the fact of the debt that they owed. It's the fact that all of that business that they were giving you for the last whatever number of years is now gone.
True.
So you're then thinking, what's the flow and effect of that? How many staff is it going to involve?
Impact.
It's just going to be, and so you imagine a lot of these things being really big. And sometimes being a good steward means that you can do things like one of the things that I did was I put in place debtors insurance. And, I mean, it didn't mean that you didn't lose money, but you didn't lose all of it.
Yeah.
You had
some insulation.
You had some insulation against some of the big ticket items.
Yep.
Some years, I mean, back when the business was smaller, you get a couple of $100,000 in a bad debt. It's a big deal. So, but part of being a good steward, I think, is, again, well, what abilities has he given you to think through these things and to come up with ways in which you can mitigate some of these things as well.
Yeah.
I mean, God doesn't promise that he's not going to take us through the bad times.
Yeah.
How are we going to react in those times? Are we going to be faithful? Or are we going to just struggle in our own strength?
Yeah.
So, challenging issues. One of the other things I think in life as a Christian, but also in business, is not to get to the stage where you're just content and you
Stop?
you stop.
Yeah.
You take your hands off the wheel. It's going along nicely. Now, I'm not saying there's not time for consolidation and time for
like rest and
for rest and regrouping, but that can easily become complacency.
Yeah.
And I think,
do you think idleness as well?
Idleness. I mean, all of those things can feed into this sense in which I don't need to keep going forward. I think in the Christian life, I don't think there's such a thing as as treading water for too long. I think God wants us to grow, and when we become so ensconced in our comfort zones, sometimes God has to do things to get us to push us a little bit out of the nest, so to speak, or out of the boat, like Peter. I'd got to the point where I knew that we needed to really think through, again, planning for the future. And the plan for the future was a number of mergers or acquisitions, and involves quite a bit of money to borrow, and millions and millions of dollars. So I just lost the enthusiasm for that. And I just had felt this sort of inner call, which I look back and think this was God speaking to me saying, what are you doing with your life? What are you doing with your money?
Yeah.
One of the problems in a growing business is you actually often find that you're not actually pulling huge amounts of cash out, because that cash is being used for growing your debtors, for growing your stock, for putting more staff on, for needing more working capital. So you're actually seeing that cash being used in growing the business, but not being able to be pulled out.
Yeah.
And I think what God was developing in me was a sense of, well, what are you doing? Like for the kingdom, And I mean, I think probably part of me was saying, well, you know, I'm involved in ministries.
Ministry.
That stage I was an elder in the church. I mean, I was involved in mission. But I think what he was really saying to me is that you have an opportunity here. You can continue to grow that business. And for some people, that may have been the best choice to make.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it wasn't the best choice for some people. But for me, he took away that passion for growing that business.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, it's just me. I've got to get over it. Just like a phase. I need to reorient my thinking, you know, pick up the ball. And so I put together this big plan. I called the bank in. They called in their private equity people. We sat down, went through it. They were very happy with it. They're on board. You can have the money. Press the button when you want. Did you have
a little scribe at the bottom of the plans?
Always had that. Always had that verse at the bottom of the plan. I don't think the private equity people or anyone were very interested in that at all.
No,
they were just interested in the numbers. So, and it was okay, but I understood their mindset. Yeah. It's different. And I went away and I was just not excited at all. Now, you would think that should be a reason to get excited, you know, and it would have once. It would have been like, let's go. This is fantastic. This is God, you know, giving me the green light.
Something shifted.
I just didn't have that sense. And again, it was like, what are you doing? And I just felt like, I think he wants me to free up more time and free up more money.
Being a good steward in that way.
In being a good steward. Different phase of my life, I think. I think that's how I see it as I look back. Yeah. And so I just paused and I just delayed. And one day I had a phone call from a director of an accounting firm in Sydney who said, oh, I've got a client who might be interested in buying your business. Yeah. So,
you'll entertain the idea.
This might be God's plan, you know. So he came up and I took him around. We had a general conversation. We hadn't signed any confidentiality agreement or anything. So I took him for a drive and then he said who wouldn't want to sell to, and I mentioned a large national company and he said, oh, well, if it was them, you know, they have ways to help. Because I'd said the reason why is because they would get rid of my managers and because their way they operated was different. You know, we were a family business still.
Of the staff and the impact it would have.
And I said, you know, the success of our business is not because of me. Yeah. I mean, also because of God, but
it's the people in it.
The people that I have, I'm part of that team. I make the ultimate decisions, but they are the ones who make this business successful every day. Yeah. Not me. I don't have that skill set. Yeah. You know, I don't want to see them put aside and pushed out of a business that's been very successful for them as well as for us. And he said, oh, no, they would, if it was these guys, they would have ways to keep them all. And I'm like, no, that's not their track record. They just get rid of that sort of middle management, senior management. So my brother owned half the business. He was pretty keen to do something. So anyway, we signed a confidentiality agreement and they said who it was. And my brother was still keen. So we started to work through the numbers. And then it got to a stage where I said, you need to put a real offer on the table. They did. It blew me away. It was far in excess of what I imagined I would be willing to pay for the business anyway. And then at the same time, the franchise group that we were in called a meeting of principals and they said, if these guys are offering to buy your business, let us know. We'd like to have an option to buy your business. So I flew to Melbourne, sat with the CEO and the CFO at the airport in a room and said, look, well, this is what we've been offered. I don't imagine you guys could ever match that. And they said, oh, let's just do a few numbers. I said, do you want me to go away? They said, no. And they did 5 minutes on a bit of paper.
And then said, the number. I reckon.
We'll offer the same. And I went, oh, righto. And that would have meant that we kept our staff, we kept the name, and I was committed still for 2 or 3 years, 2 years. Yep. And so I went back. My brother was excited about all of that. And we thought, well, maybe this is the way forward. And then I had a third call from a rival company, smaller than us, the CEO had worked for us a little bit at
Mm-hmm.
one stage, so I knew him fairly well. And he said, "Oh, I've got a great idea. We're going to buy your business." And I said, "Great, but you don't have enough money to buy our
Mm-hmm.
business." And so I got off the phone and I thought about it, rang him back and said, "Well, what about we put these businesses together and we get someone to buy out part of ours so I have money
Mm-hmm. we
we can take out of the business?" Because
Yeah.
I'm thinking, God seems to be telling me to free up my time,
Yeah.
free up something we can invest for the kingdom.
Yeah.
So he said, "Well, that could be a possibility." Long story short, we did a deal where we did a joint venture and we then grew that business. I stepped back, became executive chairman, so I was freed up
Mm-hmm.
in my time. We put a CEO on, a CFO on, and we proceeded to grow that business with a national franchisor owning a minority share of the business,
Yeah.
which was unheard of. They didn't do that normally.
Mm.
And then eventually it got to the point where I felt like their goals and ours were diverging somewhat, and we sold out the rest of our shareholding. And in the meantime, of course, I'd freed up my time. We had
Mm-hmm.
pulled money out of the business and then it was like, well, how do I be a good steward of what we've pulled out of the business now? We hadn't been able to pull money out. We'd pulled money out, but not anything substantial.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
What are we going to do with that now?
Mm.
And so again, what you could do is you say, well, here's all these amazing things that God is doing.
Mm-hmm.
We can give that back to him.
Yeah.
It's his anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
And see that. But the other idea was, why don't we invest this into a passive income stream
Mm-hmm.
that we can continue to draw a passive income from?
Yeah.
And so that's what we did. We actually retained our buildings in the deal, the sale, and we became landlords and then expanded that so that we now had a passive income that we've been able to then, divert into ministries. And God's opened up doors and opportunities both locally and internationally, globally, to be involved with things that I would never have ever considered being part of. Until you say, "Okay, God, I'm available," and then He goes, "All right, well, I want you to do this and that," and it's like, I don't think I'm very suited for that. And you say, "Okay, away we go."
Yeah.
And that's the exciting thing about being a Christian, I think, is if we say yes, I'm available, He'll take you to places
that you wouldn't have
that
thought
you
of.
would never have thought of going, into ministries that you'd never ever heard of or considered.
What's one area of ministry that kind of opened up that you didn't kind of foresee?
Oh, look, I think my work in Kenya has it's definitely been a result of that. I've been going now for a good number of years.
Yeah. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that one?
Yeah, so it
What it's about?
started off as essentially evangelism and church planning ministry. Wasn't started by me. I was just asked again at around the same time as we were selling the first part of our business.
Yeah.
So he said, "Why don't you come to Kenya? This is what God's doing there." And we prayed about it and went and have been going ever since. So it started as evangelism and church planning, and we now partner with about 100 churches in that part. So there's Kenya, Uganda and Tanzania, mainly because the tribes spill out into those areas. The country boundaries are artificial in some respects. So that's what's happened there. And then it's now, opened up opportunities for all sorts of things, in terms of people's lives. So you have a church community, you're in a community where there's incredible needs.
Yeah.
How do we find ways in which we can help people who are struggling to be self-supporting so that you move from simply being a relief organisation to a development partner, where you're partnering with people, where you're both in this partnership, learning together, growing together, finding ways where people who have nothing are now able to not only survive but thrive in those environments. And that could be anything from small business startups to better ways to be more efficient in terms of even running orphanages and those sorts of things. How do you make an orphanage self-supporting? Well, we've been able to do that.
You've even done that with the wells that you've
And
dug in
and
different
then
villages and
yeah,
making sure, like, the longevity of it and what the resources are to kind of maintain such plant equipment out in the middle of
yeah. Well, that's an
Africa.
interesting one because that was a people in the desert in northwestern
Mm,
Turkana, where we've been able to tap into water. We have to go down 130 meters, but
mm,
tap into water that is a lifesaver for a community that lives in the desert.
yeah.
So not only does it allow for people to have water domestically, but it allows them to grow their herds of goats and camels. You know, if
Mm,
they have more goats and camels, they can sell them.
yeah.
They can provide for the kids to go to school, you know, for them to have clothes and food and all those
It's
sorts of
almost
things.
it's an economic development. It started off just a well,
It
but
started
for
off
the
as a
community,
well.
it's
Yeah, it's interesting. My passion has been holistic mission. So, you
mm,
know, to see people thrive, not just physically, emotionally, but also spiritually.
yeah.
And so part of what we're doing is to bring a message of hope to people
Mm,
about Jesus, and see that those villages transformed by people who genuinely want a relationship with Jesus as King of their lives,
yeah.
and what that brings to a community. What it does, it brings people who saw themselves as having no hope
Mm,
to now seeing that there's hope,
yeah.
not just hope physically, but there, you know, most of those people in those developing countries are spiritual people.
Mm-hmm.
And now for me as a Christian, I think we can bring a message of hope that is much greater than they've imagined,
Yeah.
and much more freeing, you know, to see them have a relationship with the living God and know their sins, their shame, their guilt removed,
Yeah.
and to be in a right relationship with God is an amazing thing. It transforms every facet of their lives. So I am a big passionate advocate for holistic mission, to see God
I love that.
transforming people in every dimension of life.
Mm,
I mean, for me as a Christian, it has to start in that spiritual,
yeah.
you know, are people who need hope. We
Mm,
all need hope. You cannot survive
without it.
for a moment without hope.
Mm,
You know, you can last without water for a few days. You can last without food for longer. You can't really last, you know, without hope for long. Where's your hope lie?
yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
that's a really key issue for us all, I think, to ask.
Mm. So you've sold the business, you've got kind of a new season that you're entering, and then this next one is what do you
Who
do?
knows?
What do you do with it once you pass?
Yes, that's a good
Mm,
question. That is a really challenging issue, and it was
mm,
brought home to me. We've always had, you know, we've always had wills,
yeah.
but not that long ago, about a year or so ago, I was heading up to the northwestern part of Kenya into
Hmm.
the place called Turkana in the desert, and I've very rarely have this sense, but I had a sense that something was going to happen. I was in danger. It's a dangerous place to be,
Mm,
particularly for a Westerner,
hmm.
because there's a lot of tribal warfare going on,
Yeah.
and it's a pretty hostile environment anyway.
Hmm.
And particularly as a Westerner, we are all seen as very wealthy. I suppose comparatively we are, and you know, and fair game for being physically, you know, assaulted. So I just had this sense for the first time that I was in danger, and I had lots of people telling me, "Oh, I think something's going to happen to you this time,"
Mm.
and even some of my non-Christian friends were, I think something's going to happen to you this time. And I was like,
You've been warned
okay,
3 times, John.
being warned.
God's sending you
Uh,
stop signs.
anyway, I was sharing this with my wife and my kids, and they were horrified
Mm,
at the thought that, okay,
can
something's going to
happen to
happen to you
you.
this time.
Yeah.
And I wasn't particularly perturbed for myself. I was reasonably at peace as far as that goes. I mean, it was a burden in the
Yeah.
sense that I just felt it. And I don't normally feel these things, but I did feel it. And it struck me that if I wasn't coming back, you know, were my affairs in order in terms of me as a Christian and as a good steward?
Mm,
So that was 2 weeks before I was leaving. And I rang our solicitors and I said, look, I need to make some changes to our wills.
yeah.
And by now, our affairs were a little bit more, a lot more complicated than they were
Yeah.
originally. With different trusts and organisations, and
Mm.
he said, "Well, how long have you got?" I said, 2 weeks. He said, "Oh, well, we'll see how we go." We literally signed the wills and all the associated documentation the day before I left.
Mm,
But it made us pause and think about what it is that we want to do when I'm gone or my wife
hmm.
is gone.
Yeah. And what does inheritance mean as
And
a
what does
Christian?
inheritance mean? I mean,
How do you how do you navigate or prepare for?
yeah,
Really, it's a preparation.
because I think most of us
Mm.
want to go, well, if we've got kids or a family,
Yeah.
we want to leave something,
Like
um,
generational wealth, kind
some
of.
sort of thing, you
Yeah.
know, particularly, I mean, it's getting even more difficult now in
Yeah,
our
of course.
society because, you know, a lot of the next generations are struggling in terms of, you know, getting basic, you know, house.
Housing.
So, you know, maybe, you know, in the future it's going to be that part of the inheritance is actually going to pay off the house you're living in.
Yeah.
You know, I think for me as a, you know, thinking through as a Christian, as a steward, stewardship, so the thing is, how much do I leave for that?
Yeah.
Versus, well, is there, you know, what is God asking me as well in terms of for the kingdom? So, you know, there's something that we all have to work through. I'm not saying that what we did is something that, you know, is right for everybody. I think in principle it is. So in principle, think about, you know, two things as a Christian. One, okay, I want to look after my family. I mean, you know, but also what am I leaving to express my worship in a sense that I belong to the living God. It's he who has blessed me, and I'm, you know, in a sense giving back a token at least of that for him, for his purposes, for his kingdom.
Yeah, I think I'm a little ashamed. Well, I was going to say a little ashamed to admit, but I've never thought about the kingdom of God. I always just think, what am I going to pass down? Making sure my husband's fine, the kids are fine, grandkids. But I don't think I thought beyond, like, including the kingdom of God in that thought process. So.
Yeah, and again, it's. I think some people do, and I'm involved with, you know, the Kenya ministry and other ministries where we've actually been in a situation where we've had no funds.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden we get some distribution from an estate, and it's allowed us to do something that we feel that God wanted us to do. We just had no capacity to do it. So I've seen it actually in real time make real changes to
like, it makes sense. It's just, I just didn't think about it.
It's
like,
just something we don't.
Like, out of order, like whether it was autopilot or
it's not.
So it's good to
our society doesn't tell us to do these things. It says, you know, look after your family, you know. But then in our case, it was like, well, our kids don't need all of this. Our kids don't need that.
Yeah.
You know, they might need some help, you know, but they don't need all this. In fact, I'm not sure that it's always the best idea to leave a lot of wealth to succeeding generations anyway. You know, used to be a bit of a joke about, you know, the first generation
earns it,
and then the second generation, you know, manages it, and the third generation just squanders it. You know, and I think there's a bit of truth.
I think there's actually statistics around that. By the time you get to the third generation, it's not wisely managed.
Yeah. You know, I think that can change, but it depends. I think probably in on the land, it's probably been different now, changing again as, you know, farms were handed down succeeding generations. But in my situation, it was like, well, what do I do? And again, it's like, do we just give it all away to these purposes? In my case, my thinking's always been, well, what can I do that actually leaves some sort of continuing benefit that can be distributed? And for us, it was, I want to do something for the family, but then I want to do something in terms of ministries. And so we set up a foundation and we set up a trust that will endure, but we're involving our kids, if they want to be part of that mission and be some of the trustees of that. So the trustees will include our two kids if they want to be involved. They don't get a financial advantage out of it, but they do get an exposure to mission that if God is calling them to be involved, then they are stewarding now.
Yeah.
So they are part of the stewardship of this ongoing.
Yeah. It's a legacy.
It's a legacy that then says, well, let's see where God takes it, because God could take that in a completely different direction. And as trustees, they can be part of that decision making that maybe in ways, and I imagine in ways that I've never considered.
The world's changing quite significantly.
You know? So, you know, and after I'm gone, you know, it's up to them.
You're with
and
Jesus.
God, isn't
You're
it?
having a party upstairs.
Yeah, I'm like, yeah, I've suddenly realised all the things where I went wrong in life, and how God's grace made up for it all. But so you know, I think it's, again, stewardship in terms of end of life and those sort of things is also a relevant topic to sort of take into consideration. trying to get that balance right, I think is not easy. And I think for some people it will be different than what we've done.
Because then you've got your, let's say probably me and Josh. I'm hoping to have a really big business, actually. Like I've always had that pull, but I want to make sure it's done right and it doesn't affect relationships or my base.
Yeah.
Yeah. If anything, it kind of scared me to start because I don't want it to affect those areas.
And I think some of those things is you just have to know where those boundaries are.
Yeah.
And keep an eye on the vision of what God wants, or you sense that God is pulling you towards. Understand that He owns it, He's running it, He's sovereign, He's in charge, but He's given you the immense privilege of being part of that journey and part of that adventure. And I'm just so thankful. I mean, I struggle as my brother and I, we had a particular medical genetic condition that the doctors basically gave up on us. But for my mother, whose 90th birthday party is tomorrow, we would have probably been a footprint in history.
Yeah.
And then to see what God does with kids that were written off, essentially written off by the medical profession, and a godly mother who said, well, I'm not giving up and God's not giving up. And then to see where God takes you in life and experiences, that if we're just open to letting God work in our lives, there's exciting things that we've never ever thought about. Like even when you go back to the topic of principles, of stewardship. I was reflecting this morning on the two parables that Jesus gave about the miners and the talents.
The talents.
And very clearly he's expressing this idea of stewardship.
Yeah.
There's this king or this master. He gets his servants together and he dispenses talents or in one in miners or money in the other. And he says, go and trade and invest and occupy until I come back again. So he's going away. He's leaving them in charge of what he's given. In one case, he gives them different amounts. And I think that is just saying, look, some of us have different levels of gifts and different abilities.
Well, you've brought this one up before. It's about risk.
Yeah, so I think that's the thing is like if, he gives some of us, some people, whether it's natural abilities or spiritual abilities or other things. And in each of those parables, there is this idea that if you are going to get a return, you have to take risk. And that's a whole topic on its own.
So
in a
many
sense,
topics
about what does that mean.
Yeah.
But here were these guys. Some were left with more talents than others. But each of them the master had an expectation that there would be some return, not necessarily the same level of return, but
it
they
was
were
working.
They were to work with what they were given, and they were to take risk. They were to take risk for the kingdom, for the king, for the master. He owned it. They were simply working it. And, when he came back, there was actually rewards for those who'd invested and been good stewards. And it's interesting. What were the rewards? Well, they were given joy. They were taken into a deeper relationship or partnership with the master. They were given more responsibility. That was the reward, more responsibility.
Thank you.
So a very different thinking to us. We would go, oh, no, the reward
would be take the pedal off.
Take the pedal off,
like cruise.
Go for a cruise, sit in the Maldives somewhere with your feet up. And God's kingdom is like, actually, you've done so well, with what I gave you. You have been a good and faithful steward. Now, here's 10 cities to look after.
Yeah.
Oh, great. Okay. But
and then there's the one that buried it.
Yeah, and there was and that's the other side of it is God's, God had this expectation, the master has this expectation that you will get a return. And if you don't, you suffer loss. Yeah. So in one parable is this like we're given different amounts, different abilities, we've got to take different levels of risk and so forth, all expected to have return. If you just bury it, it's not an option. You are going to suffer loss in some way. And then the 10 miners, were equally given these amounts of money to invest. And I think that probably tells us that we have been given equal opportunities to make decisions for being good stewards, to follow Christ,
Mhm.
to put God as a priority. We have equal opportunity to make those decisions. We have equal opportunity in terms of time
Mhm.
that we're given to do what God wants us to do. So there's certain areas of our lives that are common to all of us.
Yeah.
We have equal opportunities
Mm.
to do these things and to go in a direction that follows God
Mm.
and to have some return in our lives.
Yeah.
And I think the key to it all isn't so much how much resulted from that.
Mm.
The key was, were you faithful?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And that is the key again. And the Apostle Paul says this in 1 Corinthians 4, he says, just consider me to be a servant. I'm a steward of the mysteries of God, being the gospel. So that was his stewardship.
Yeah.
He was a preacher, a teacher of the word. He was to go in and see churches planted and the world transformed at that time.
Yeah.
So he says, just see me as a good steward. And ultimately, I'm going to give an account to God. And he says, a steward is called to be faithful.
Yeah.
He doesn't say a steward is called that must give this sort of results or whatever. We're to be called to be faithful, and God will produce the results.
Yeah.
That's the key. And those two parables, I think, tell us that thing. Jesus is the master.
Yeah.
He's gone away.
Yep.
He's left us in charge of his affairs. Some of us have, good, great abilities in different areas, and we're called to really be good, faithful stewards, to see a return on that. Others of us are given less, but we're still called to get a return in some way.
Yeah.
It's about being content. It's about not envying someone else who has more. It's about seeing where God has placed us with what God has given us, to be content, to not be envying someone else, to not be resentful, and to see ourselves, this is just between God and me. And that ultimately, I just need to be faithful to what he's given me. If that's a little, be faithful in it. If that's a lot, you've got a big responsibility to be faithful in that as well. So in every aspect of life, not just in, obviously it's a spiritual. Our relationship with God, am I a good, faithful steward? Our relationship with others, in a relationship, marriage relationship, children, family, then the wider thing, our workplaces,
community,
our communities, but also ultimately, I think, environment too. Christians aren't exempt from having a stewardship responsibility when it comes to the environment as well.
Yeah, when you just mentioned before about, it's all God's, the first thing I thought was the earth. I was like, I've never thought about that element.
I think for our generation, my generation, it's probably something that we, as Christian generation anyway, that we haven't taken very seriously. And I think your generation and younger generations
a bit more so
are taking it much more seriously. I think the difference is that as Christians, we are to see ourselves as stewards, but not as worshippers of the creation. So we worship a creator who made everything, but we are tempted to worship the creation, which is a lesser thing. Now, we who worship the God who created everything also have this responsibility to make sure that we do what we can to have an environment that expresses being good stewards. Because ultimately what we're working towards as Christians is we're new heaven and new earth. Okay, you say, well, that's, the old earth is gone, the old, heaven and earth are gone. There's a new, heaven on earth. That's true. But we as Christians, I think, are meant to express in some way the foretaste of that kingdom now. I think our society tends particularly to tempt us to put all of our worship in the creation and not the creator. How do you see
that kind of play out, like an example?
So I think the example is that we become so preoccupied with an agenda that we forget that our trust is in God.
Yeah, okay.
Now,
it's like where your time, attention, resources are going.
Everything is fully in there. In other words, we are basically by actions expressing that our dependence is totally on the earth.
Yeah, okay, now I understand.
As opposed to saying, no, I'm trusting in you, God. It's your earth. You're going to bring it to pass anyway.
Yeah.
That doesn't exempt me from responsibility to be a good steward.
Yep.
But not to be so occupied, so so much
consumed. I think the word is consumed by
a
agenda or
an agenda, a program,
yeah,
I must do a
yeah.
certain, against
I
all
get what you meant.
odds,
Like
even if
it's
it means,
above God. Like if you're
yeah,
not putting in the same amount of effort
yeah,
than you would to God, it is become an idol in a
yeah, it
sense.
becomes an idol because it
Yeah.
says, our whole future is depending on this.
Yeah.
No, our future depends on God.
Yeah. Yeah.
That He's the one who made it, and He wants
Mm.
us to keep it. That was the original
Mm.
idea of the garden. Adam and Eve were
Yeah.
to tend the garden. Now, the fall
Mm.
has meant that this garden
Yeah.
is broken.
Mm.
Does that mean that Christians don't have any responsibility? No, I don't think so. I think we still have a responsibility.
Yeah.
We just don't have, we're just not to be consumed,
Yeah. I
which
think
is
the
the word
word.
you use. I think is a good one.
Mm.
We're not to be consumed with it to the point where
Mm.
we forget God is sovereign.
Mm.
God has a plan. He's going to bring it to pass.
Yeah.
We don't have to trust in the creation. We have to trust in God.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the difference lies.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for walking me through that. I had to kind of have an image to
Yeah.
kind of.
Yeah. I think our
Mm.
generation gave up on it a bit or didn't find it a priority
Yeah. I think
until
it'd be a
more recent
priority.
times. It's been the younger
Mm.
generations, I think, particularly younger generations of Christians who've raised this as an issue.
Yeah.
And it's a good one.
Because I guess the whole point is your children are going to inherit the earth. So you want to leave, again, as you mentioned, it's stewardship. You kind of
Yeah.
want to leave it in a better place than you found it, but
Yeah.
not
And I
be
think the
consumed by it.
difference too is as Christians, the way we think through things is that we need to think about when it comes to the environment, whether a particular course of action that we're consumed with, even at the expense of the livelihood and the health and that of the existing population.
Yeah.
There's sometimes I think what we've got to weigh up and say, we want to pursue this idea of stewardship of our environment, but not at the expense of making a whole lot of people suffer
Yeah.
because of that. So we have to balance those things.
Yeah.
Like
it's good to be passionate, just not consumed.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of summing it up.
Yeah.
Be passionate for God because it's His, but don't be consumed with it to the point where it becomes an idol.
Yeah.
And you find yourself actually worshipping the creation, not the creator.
So good. Something I have not thought about till now.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
That was really, really good.